Welcome to Blockstars, Ripple's podcast that features leaders and developers in crypto and blockchain to discuss the latest trends, technologies, and the real-world problems being solved. I'm your host, Ripple CTO, David Schwartz. Today, we're embarking on an intriguing journey into the heart of Ripple's latest venture, the launch of its very own stablecoin. Joining me for this deep dive into the world of digital currencies is none other than Ripple President Monica Long. Monica, it's fantastic to have you with us today to discuss Ripple's bold step into the stablecoin market.
I'm honored to be here, David. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are? I told them already that you are Ripple President. What do you do?
What do I do, David? I've had the privilege of working with David since almost the beginning. Actually, I joined Ripple a year into it. It was the fall of 2013. So at that point, you'd already built and launched the ledger, of course, predating establishing Ripple. But I mean, the company had been around for a year. So I'm sure for you, it had already felt like a long time. But here we are more than, I guess, almost 12 years later. So as president, I'm responsible for our products as well as commercializing those products, our sales efforts, and then also our initiative to support developers building on XRP Ledger.
It's been quite the journey, hasn't it?
Yeah. Has it felt like a short time or a long time to you?
You know, it sometimes feels really short and it sometimes feels really long. It's kind of like a relativistic thing. Sometimes it seems like we've been doing this forever, and other times it seems like we've just barely started. It's quite odd.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
So let's talk about the Ripple's entrance into the stablecoin market. This is a pretty significant strategic move for us. For a while, we've used a combination of assets in things like ODL, now Ripple Payments, XRP, fiat, stablecoins. We've built those into our cross-border solutions to provide the best experience for our customers. And in emerging markets, we've seen a demand for stablecoin payouts in lieu of local fiat currency. Can you tell people a little bit about why we made the decision to launch a stablecoin and how it fits with our vision for the future of finance and the Internet of Value?
So, stablecoins it's become a massive market within the crypto market in and of itself. So today, market cap of north of $150 billion, and the projections are that this is a market that will reach, almost $3 trillion within the next handful of years. When I think about Ripple's foray into launching its own stablecoin, I can't help but think about the origins of the company and XRP Ledger. And this goes back to you and Arthur and Jed originally conceptualizing the decentralized exchange on XRP Ledger and the concept of IOUs, which I would say were probably the first stablecoins in crypto. Is that fair to say, David?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I remember, joining the company, you were very patient explaining things to me at the whiteboard. And what I remember was you would talk about how the vision was to create issued assets onto the ledger, and built into the ledger was an order book that would be a really efficient liquidity mechanism for these different assets. And this is how the ledger would ultimately facilitate efficient transactions and in particular payments. So I suppose it just goes back to those fundamentals of, if we think that blockchains are here to revolutionize finance and to create a new future of decentralized finance, you need to have representations of currencies on blockchains. So it's that fundamental, to make decentralized finance happen, you need these stable coins. This is your show, so I don't mean to turn you into the guest. But yeah, how were you originally thinking about stable coins and their role on the ledger?
I think in the early days, we realized that there had to be on-ramps and off-ramps. There had to be some way to get money onto the ledger that didn't necessarily involve buying a volatile asset or committing to a new form of money. There had to be, a new unit of account. If the only way on the ledger was to buy a volatile digital asset, then there was no value. First of all, there was no value in digital assets at the time, right? They were all extremely low in value. So there would be no way that you could do large payments or enterprise payments. I think over time, the vision has changed a little bit, that it's still important as on-ramps and off-ramps. It's still important to have an alternative to digital assets that are volatile. But I think a view now is that if DeFi is going to work, it can't be all digital assets. And it also can't all be one stablecoin, because if we're going to build these decentralized, permissionless public blockchains and the assets on them that are controlled, that kind of defeats the point of them being permissionless. So the idea, I think, today is that these are like key DeFi enablers.
Yes. And this is what we've come to. For a few years now, we've had a concerted effort behind developer relations and supporting developers through RippleX, lots of programs, new development work on the core ledger itself, adding features and also developer kits around the ledger. So we've put all of that effort in, and ultimately it's a bit chicken and the egg to get developer momentum on XRP Ledger, which we are seeing. But to really see that flywheel pick up more momentum, you need to have high quality assets. In particular, right now, DeFi does need on-ramps and off-ramps that are reliable and efficient. So that's mostly been in the form of stablecoins. We also see the need for the world of crypto to have reliable, compliant stablecoin offerings. And the two that have been most prominent, USDC and USDT, they've been around for a while, but we do think that there's space and opportunity, and the market kind of needs to see more high quality offerings. So that's where we come in. And that's on XRP Ledger. And David, you had leading into the question of, why now? Why has Ripple been thinking about this for a long time? And you mentioned that we have used stable coins and a mix of different tokens as part of our payments offering. So it's clear that using stablecoin for payments, that there is a use case there, and so it also serves the set of commercialized offerings that we've built around payments.
Yeah, it does. I think there are a lot of people who are a little surprised by the timing. There's a lot of people who said that we should have done it a long time ago. But I think one of the things that makes now an important time is the launch of the AMM feature. An AMM doesn't work if all you have is one great asset. You need like a diverse array of assets for it to. You can't make markets between one asset, right? You need an array of assets, and of course, the Ripple stablecoin is a potential counter asset for every existing asset. And I think another one is the lending protocol. Like, it doesn't make sense to have loans denominated. Like, for a very small number of people, they might want to borrow, denominated in Bitcoin or Ether, XRP. But most people, if you owe money, you want it denominated in dollars, and you want to pay it back in dollars, because otherwise you're you're weirdly vulnerable to the volatility in the ecosystem. So how would you say the stablecoin fits in with the cross-border payments vision and the digital asset vision? Yeah,
so for our payments customers, we've supported various tokens in the payment flow. Of course, XRP as a bridge asset, and that position for XRP doesn't change in our view, especially as more and more types of assets get tokenized on blockchains, and there's a need for efficient liquidity between what will increasingly become a longer and longer tail of different types of assets. Even amongst the currencies, there'll be different issuers of different currencies. And the more that transactions happen, especially right on Ledger with the decentralized exchange, there'll be more and more demand for XRP as a bridge asset. That will continue. But for stablecoins, there's different use cases where, for example, a beneficiary might be in a market where they would prefer to receive payment in a US dollar stablecoin than in their local currency. These are markets with very volatile domestic currencies. So that's for like one example where we see more of a need for it. And I would say too that the other kind of broad use case we see is that there's more and more interest in the network of off-ramps that we've built over the years. So through our payments network, we can support off-ramping into 70 different countries and currencies. And so even for crypto native players that, maybe they are dealing in DeFi, a DeFi application, there's this use case to off-ramp into a local market.
One of the things that I find the most interesting about stablecoins is that they are sort of like a regulatory compliance touch point for DeFi. People use stablecoins for all manner of very loosely regulated functions. They use them like on Ethereum. They use them on the XRP Ledger for things like the AMMs. While the stablecoin itself is subject to strict regulation, Ripple has restrictions on who they can issue the stablecoin to, who they can redeem. Presumably, it will be distributed in part by exchanges who have to know their customers and comply with, anti-money laundering. What's the regulatory compliance from Ripple's point of view for the stablecoin?
Compliance is something that, like you said, it's going to be paramount, especially if we see more enterprise users of stablecoins and of blockchains for financial use cases. It's something you can't compromise on. It has to be, rock solid, airtight. And that's something that we've always prioritized, compliance and security above all else, and the things that we build and ship. So this is no exception. The way that we're entering the market is, one, ensuring that we have the proper licensing. And with that we're, adhering to what regulations we need to adhere to. So with the stablecoin, here in the US, we have money transmission licenses in more than 40 states. We also set about acquiring Standard Custody, which is a registered trust company with the New York DFS. New York DFS is widely regarded, not just in the US, but internationally, as very robust regulator. So we're already building toward the DFS and trust company requirements as we go through that, closing the Standard Custody transaction. So my point being is we're holding kind of the gold standard in mind in how we're building and how we will be regulated. Of course, overseas, we also have applied for e-money institution licensing in Europe, as well as we have the major payment institution license in Singapore, and also have applied or received virtual asset service provider licensing in Europe and other places in the Middle East. So licensing is prong one, and then prong two is also just, the compliance procedures that we'll implement. Of course, any customer that we're onboarding, any business, will go through our Know Your Customer, AML onboarding process. And, we also have a whole robust compliance operation on the mint and burn side of the stablecoin.
And I think architecturally, the fact that it's one-to-one backed with actual USD cash or cash equivalents like treasuries is important.
Yes. Super important. And that's part of the DFS requirements. Yes. One-to-one backed in US dollars.
So one question that I hear a lot is what the Ripple stablecoin means for XRP, and does this reflect some reduction in our commitment to XRP, or is this a replacement for XRP? And I think obviously the answer to that is no. I mean, we want there to be more credible assets on the DEX. We want trading volume. We think that that XRP has a unique role on the DEX as a bridge asset, features like auto bridging, and we think that more volume on the XRP ledger is a good thing, both for XRP and for the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to kind of where we started the conversation, where we think of, our thesis of where we see a lot of utility for XRP Ledger is financial use cases. One of the original use cases it was really, it has been best in class at since the beginning, is payments. And, having different currencies represented on Ledger means just more possibilities for not just payments, but other types of financial use cases. And we also, especially US dollar stablecoins right now, it's clear if you look at DeFi as a whole category, a lot of the total value locked is in USD stables. So it's a really critical piece of infrastructure, is actually a way to look at it for on and off ramps to make any ledger more useful. In the case of XRP Ledger and XRP, we really think that it will facilitate only, more usage and more liquidity.
Yeah. As Ripple expands its footprint in the digital currency space, particularly in what we've called enterprise DeFi, how do you envision the adoption of stablecoins fitting in that role, for the future of finance, both domestically and internationally?
We've talked about payments as a use case, and you touched on the lending protocol. That's a great example of a more forward-looking use case that we see taking hold on XRP Ledger. I think that there'll be more kinds of financial use cases. Are there any in particular that you've been observing and watching, David, that or that maybe you always envisioned and that we just haven't seen yet?
I think real world asset tokenization is like another one of those sort of core enterprise DeFi type uses. I think some of the others, it's kind of early to say. And I think when you're buying and selling things, I think there are a lot of people who aren't going to necessarily want to use digital assets to do it. There'll be digital assets maybe providing liquidity, but I think it's kind of a barrier to entry if people have to move into a digital asset in order to do things. I mean, obviously I want digital assets to be available and I think they'll be competitive, but I think that they're just more options are good. If you look at ecosystems that have been compelling, like the internet is a compelling ecosystem. You have probably a phone that gives you internet access everywhere. You have internet access at home. You have internet access at work. And it's because it's a compelling ecosystem that has so much value. And any one thing launched on the internet is now available, has a massive target market. So I think you need that world where there's a compelling ecosystem of all of these interesting things that get people into that ecosystem, and then they'll pick the things that work best for them. And so I've never felt that like, oh, like this thing will take away from this other thing. I think it's all accretive. Like right now, we need to just sort of grow the pie so that the whole digital asset, DeFi ecosystem is compelling to people. Trying to fight over, is this thing going to take market share away from it? It's just way too early. We just need to be better at everything so that people find the ecosystem compelling.
Totally. When you mention real world assets, it reminds me, there's a number of companies that are Web3 native who are building really interesting platforms to serve financial institutions with especially capital markets type use cases. So tokenizing equities, bonds, et cetera. And we are likewise seeing demand for that kind of use case from our custody business. So the different banks that we work with. So you could see these, even, the parts of Ripple kind of coming together around real world asset tokenization between, our custody customers, the banks, as well as some of the native Web3 developers who are building really interesting applications and might be able to bring more of the demand side for some of these new types of assets. And like you said, those markets are used to dealing in pretty simply, dollars, maybe euro, yen, et cetera. So starting with a stablecoin as a base asset for those makes sense.
I think it's time to take some listener questions from @X_Anderson, ANDERSON. Are you planning to launch more stablecoins after RLUSD? Apparently, they're calling our stablecoin RLUSD, like an RLEUR, for example. That's a good question.
It is a good question. We are right now really focused on launching the US dollar stablecoin. We don't take lightly. It's a big effort, not just from the technology side. But I mean, more than anything, the operation of it, making sure, that we're holding a tight line on compliance, that we're giving a good experience to our customers with onboarding, and, always laser focus on maintaining the peg. Stablecoin's not very useful unless it's stable. So we'll be really focused on that, and also connecting it with our demand side, the use cases like our payments flows. We recognize that there will be demand and use cases for other types of stablecoins in the future. I think what's developing in Europe with micro-regulation is very interesting. Of course, the main piece of the micro-regulation that all stablecoin issuers are paying attention to is, you need to be licensed in the issuer needs to be a European licensed entity, which, we're certainly watching that market.
Yeah, it is very small compared to the USD market for some reason. So there's a question, it's just whether all the effort is worth it given the market size. One more, this is an easy one. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, the market will continue to evolve and develop. I don't know that anyone would have guessed that 2 US dollar stablecoins would be the top assets on the crypto charts at this stage, but they are.
It is bizarre, isn't it? So this last one is an easy one from Truthseeker79, TRUTHSKR79. Will Ripple have an XRP Ripple USD pairing on the AMM? And that one's easy because there's nothing we need to do for that to happen. Once an asset is on the XRP ledger, anyone can create an AMM. And if nobody else does, I certainly will, because that's like the most logical thing to exist. All right, we'll go to my favorite segment. I really love to do this because my guests generally don't like it. I always ask people to bring out their crystal ball and give their thoughts and feelings on where we are in this journey and what lies ahead for Ripple. You've been with Ripple for a very long time. You've been right in the heart of our product, our communications, everything that we've been doing, a strategy. Can you give a sort of overview of what you think is in store for Ripple, the industry, the stablecoin market? I'll just give you the broadest possible. What do you see?
Yeah, I can see why your guests don't generally like the question. It feels it's a tall order for anyone to ask, and then coming from you, there's just this extra pressure to impress. No, I'm kidding.
And I hate when people do it to me.
So people do too all the time.
I know, and I hate it.
But we've worked together long enough. I could just be open here. Actually, so when you say look into the future, I think about our past, and you and I were just saying it's felt like a short, long time. So in 2013, when when I just started, we were talking about the use cases, the technology and whatnot. It felt right there. It felt so obvious that this is the future of finance, and the hard work's already been done because the Bitcoin blockchain had been invented, the XRP Ledger had been invented. And so then it was just about, now it's just about, productizing use cases. So in that moment, it would have felt like by now, the future of finance, Web3 would be the way of finance today. And so in that way, it's taking much longer than I think what at least I had expected in that moment when I joined the company. But then in hindsight, when I look backward, I think about, well, it really has been a short time if you think about the aspiration of Ripple and the industry overall to create the next age of the internet, the next age of finance. And what I think we and probably everyone else in the industry underestimated was the hard work of connecting blockchains to traditional financial rails, which has to be done. I think the way of going about it of, out with the old, in with the new, we're just designing new finance purely on blockchain. I don't think that's the way of the future. I don't think Ripple's ever believed that. So there's like the bringing the rest of the financial world along to arrive at the same conclusion that we have of this is the future, and then to do the actual technical work of integrating the old and the new systems. And then the additional thing that we underestimate, I think the rest of the industry has too, is regulation. And just it's felt like a lot of thrash over the years of how different governments receive this technology, understandably wanting to really protect consumer interests, which we do too, but to find that way forward of this is actual, let's put together some sensible policy and regulation where we can, invent and reinvent finance in a way that's helpful to people and brings down costs and makes things a lot more efficient. That was a long-winded, meandering answer, but I'm really more than ever, I'm more bullish about what the next 1 to 2 years holds for Ripple because of the payoff from all the work we put in.
I certainly hope you're right. We've been on this journey for a long time. I'd like to thank my guest, Ripple President Monica Long, for joining me today. Pleasure hosting you on BlockStars. Don't be a stranger. I know you won't. This is probably the third time we've spoken to each other just today.
Yeah, exactly. I can't be a stranger. That would be a problem. But thank you, David. We do
see a lot of each other, don't we? And a huge thank you to our listeners, as always, for tuning in. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter at JoelKatz, JoelKatz. And remember to follow at RippleXDev, RippleXDev on Twitter. I guess I have to call it X now, to keep up with the latest industry news, technical updates, and cool new developer projects from the community. See you around the blockchain.